Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is Chapter 11, Section 1, the Industrial Revolution. We're going to look at Chapter 11, which the entire chapter is called The Nation Grows and Prospers. And 11.1 is going to deal specifically with the Industrial Revolution. We've talked a lot this year about the economy of the South, which was largely farm-based and plantation-based. We're going to talk about the growth of industry in the North in the late 17 and the early to mid 1800s. Just a couple of notes on this lesson. There are a number of good videos that I've linked on Schoology that will correspond to the Industrial Revolution. There's a couple of videos titled The Industrial Revolution, and there's a really cool video about a young immigrant girl from Ireland who comes to the United States to work in a factory in Lowell, Massachusetts. That's the story of Mary Driscoll. That is linked to your Schoology feed as well. And also, I have linked the vocab deck from Quizlet for 11.1. There are 4 vocab words here on this mini lecture that we're going to do, but there are about 9 or 10 words altogether. The entire deck you guys will be able to find on your Quizlet page, and also linked to Schoology, your Schoology feed as well. So let's continue on by looking at some of the vocab we're going to see in this reading here. First term is the Industrial Revolution, which is the widespread use of machines to manufacture goods. Second term is factory system, which is a system that brought workers and machines together in one place to produce goods. Third term is interchangeable parts, which are machine-made parts that would be identical. One of the first items that we're going to see would be mass-produced using interchangeable parts, would be a rifle that was used for, that was sold eventually to the United States Army. And the last term on the list here, but not the last term in all the deck. Remember, the full deck is on Quizlet and also linked to your Schoology page. The last term on the worksheet here is urbanization, which is the movement of large populations from farms to cities. As more and more people begin to settle in cities and in large places in the Northeast, large towns and cities in the Northeast, this process of urbanization is the movement of people from farms to cities. So let's continue with our reading here. And if you look here at the first paragraph, anybody that's paying attention today will note the typo right off the bat. The first part of the reading, first paragraph, before the 1880s, most goods were produced by hand. That should say the 1780s. Okay, so make a correction on your worksheet. Before the 1780s, most goods were produced by hand. Then in the early 1800s, the Industrial Revolution changed the way goods were made. New machines were invented that replaced hand tools, and the factory system is going to bring workers and machinery together in one place to produce goods. Before the factory system, you might have had someone manufacturing goods on their own, maybe in a barn or at their farm. When factories start to spring up in the larger cities in the Northeast in the early 1800s, it's going to bring workers and machinery together in one place to produce goods faster. Goods can now be produced faster and more inexpensively, and gradually the American economy is going to shift from farming to manufacturing. And we'll take a look at the chart at the end of the reading to explain. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the 1700s. It began actually in England in 1764. James Hargreaves invented a machine called the spinning jenny, a machine for spinning wool and cotton. And Eli Whitney's invention of interchangeable parts, we talked about that a moment ago in the vocab up top. Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts invention made it easy to build and run productive machines and factories. Samuel Slater, a British mechanic, memorized designs of the machines in a British factory, and then he came to the United States. In 1790, Slater and a man named Moses Brown opened up a mill in Rhode Island, and other factories soon are going to follow. Lowell, Massachusetts became the first factory town, really, in the United States. Matter of fact, Lowell was called a model factory town. Model meaning it was one of the better operated, and one of the more organized, and one of the better places for workers to work among the first factories in North America and the United States. The towns were small communities where workers lived in attractive houses near the factories. Working hours in the new factories were long. Working conditions were not the best in most American factories in the early days of the Industrial Revolution. Lowell, as I said, was among the best, but most workers worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and most workers were women and children. Women and children were largely hired because you could afford, if you were a factory owner, you could afford to offer less pay to both a lady and a young worker, less pay than a man for the same job. So as a result, most of the workers in many of the early factories were women and children. As factories grew, conditions worsened and wages would begin to drop. The amount of money that people would earn an hour in a factory would decline, as would the conditions in those factories as factories grew. Factory system is going to lead to urbanization as workers moved from farms to cities to work. And they moved in large numbers. Remember, before the Industrial Revolution in the North, while there certainly weren't large plantations like in the South, many, many Northerners also worked on small farms. And this factory system would lead many of them to leave the farms and move to the cities to work. The drawback, or some of the downsides of urbanization, was overcrowding, pollution, and outbreaks of disease. And the benefits of city life, you can imagine people coming to cities for the first time in large numbers. There's going to be shops, and there's going to be attractions such as museums and theaters. So there's actually a mixed bag with urbanization. You have some definite drawbacks with overcrowding, pollution, and sickness and disease, but you also have people coming to the city for the first time where they're able to experience things that they might not have been able to experience while living in a rural part of early America. We'll talk next about the causes and the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so to wrap this up, we'll look at the chart here on the causes and the effects of the revolution, or excuse me, the causes and effects of the Industrial Revolution. You'll notice in the middle of the chart, you've got the title of the chart, and above you've got the causes and the things that caused the Industrial Revolution, and below you're going to have the effects of the revolution. A couple of major things behind the cause of the Industrial Revolution. And by revolution here, we don't mean a war in the sense the American Revolution. We mean a revolution meaning a big change. Okay, so when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we're talking about a huge way in which Americans manufactured goods, and in a huge way, a huge change in which the way Americans worked as well. So causes of the Industrial Revolution, there were British ideas for machines that arrived in the United States. And in the War of 1812, Britain began stopping trade to the United States, and Americans are forced out of necessity to start producing more goods for themselves. So these causes are going to result in the Industrial Revolution. The things that we just talked about, the growth of factories, the building of factories and the growth of large cities in the north, urbanization, people moving from the farms and the rural areas to the cities. And the effects are going to be factory system is going to spread throughout the northeastern United States. Okay. As people move closer to factories, cities grow. Remember, to work in factories, you have to live relatively close to the factory. And to live relatively close to the factory, you're going to be surrounding yourselves with other people who are going to be working in the factories. And these factories are going to help with the development of large cities. But another effect here on the bottom of the chart is with growing cities, you're also going to have the problems of overcrowding, disease. You're going to have, actually, it's not mentioned, but you're going to see a great increase in crime. You're going to see increases in violence in large cities as people move there in large numbers. And you're going to see a decrease in the amount of personal space which people are going to have, and living conditions are going to reflect that in many ways. While exciting in many ways, city life could also be very, very dirty. City life could be very, very dangerous in particular places. So these are some of the causes and the effects of the Industrial Revolution from the late 1790s to the early to mid 1800s. 2 questions for you guys to work on after you've watched your videos and after you've looked at your full Quizlet deck on your Schoology feed for this section. How did working conditions change as factories grew? How did workers and their conditions change? And the chart skill question, what were the effects of the Industrial Revolution in the United States? To answer question 1, you can use the reading we just did. And to answer question 2, you can refer to the chart. Please answer your questions separately on line paper, or you can answer them as a Google Doc, as long as you number your responses, and please put the section on top of the Google Doc in your line paper also. This is Chapter 11, Section 1, The Industrial Revolution. Ta-ta for now, and we will see you guys another day soon.